The Oregon sun feels dry and a little too bright as it stretches across the dusty plains of Wasco County. You blink, ahead of you. A cloud of sand is rising. At first, it looks like nothing, maybe a pickup truck kicking up a little dirt. But then you realize it's more than one vehicle. It's dozens, rolling in together like a convoy. Not military, though no khaki, no Humvees. These people are dressed in orange, red, maroon, flowing garments, men and women both. They're young, mostly, some older ones too. You catch a glimpse of a serene face through a car window, hands resting calmly in a lap, as if they're not about to change everything in this quiet corner of America. This was 1981. The beginning of something strange and vast and almost entirely forgotten. Honestly, when I first read about this story, I had to pause and reread the first few paragraphs. A group of spiritual seekers bought 64,000 acres of Oregon desert and planned to build a utopia, and they nearly pulled it off. That's the kind of thing that makes your brain tilt sideways. It feels made up. But no, this happened, and it unraveled in a way that's even more unbelievable. If this kind of story hits you like it hit me, consider subscribing, and hey, leave a comment telling me where you're listening from, or just say hi. I read them all, and it makes researching and writing these even more fun. All right, now let's slow things down and step into tonight's journey together. You drive alongside them, following the odd procession into this parched, sagebrush-lined nowhere. The vehicles are mostly battered station wagons and boxy vans. From India to San Francisco to this dusty patch in Central Oregon, they've come a long way, and at the front of the caravan, a gleaming Rolls-Royce. Inside is a man draped in flowing robes, a long beard falling over his chest. His eyes are closed. This is Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, or, at least, that's what he's called for now. You pull off your sunglasses and watch. No one's speaking. There's a sort of reverent hush, like a procession in slow motion. They aren't here for sightseeing. They're here to build. And the land, it's not exactly Eden. You feel the hot air drying out your skin instantly. The ground is cracked in places, and a hard wind stirs up dust devils that dance lazily by the roadside. But to the followers of Rajneesh, this land is pure potential, a blank canvas, and they have a vision that's big, wildly big. One mainstream fact, you might not know this group, known as Rajneeshis, wasn't small potatoes. They had over 2,000 full-time residents here at their peak, making Rajneeshpuram one of the fastest-growing communities in Oregon at the time. Their goal? Create a self-sustaining city based on spiritual principles, free love, and let's be honest, a very specific type of hierarchy. The Bhagwan didn't speak publicly anymore. He'd gone into public silence, which is a great way to avoid answering hard questions, if you think about it. So his spokeswoman took the stage. Her name, Ma Anand Sheila. But we'll get to her. You find your way among the early construction crews, followers setting up yurts, hammering frames, laying down roads. They wear red, mostly, or orange. Colors of the root chakra, you're told. Some laugh as they work. Others chant quietly to themselves. No one seems frustrated. No one checks their phone. It's the early 80s, remember. There's this buzzy sense of purpose in the air, like someone flipped a switch in their souls. You wonder if it's real or performative, if they're enlightened or just sunburned and committed. The Bhagwan stays in his modest trailer. For now, you catch glimpses him being wheeled in a dental chair from one place to another. Silent. Distant. Somehow floating above it all. Historians still argue whether he was truly a spiritual teacher or just a charismatic manipulator who got bored in India and decided to try capitalism in Oregon. There's something childlike about the early days. You watch people carve gardens out of cracked earth, pipe water in from wells, set up solar panels. They name the place Rajneeshpuram. And even that sounds dreamy, like a utopia straight out of a 1970s paperback. You half expect unicorns to trot by. Here's your quirky tidbit. One of the first structures completed in Rajneeshpuram was not a meditation hall or a dormitory, but a massive printing press. Why? To churn out Bhagwan's hundreds of books, sayings, and transcripts, self-publishing the true first step to spiritual dominance. At night, they dance. Music blares from loudspeakers. You see bodies move with unself-conscious abandon. Laughter mingling with sweat and dust under the stars. It's kind of beautiful, kind of weird, a little of both. You fall asleep your first night there in a borrowed tent. Somewhere nearby, someone is humming. Another is sobbing, softly cleansing. You're told, a release. The air smells like dry grass and sweat and a hint of patchouli. You try to sleep, but your brain is buzzing with questions. What's really happening here? Is this the beginning of a new world, or a high-budget delusion? You roll over on your cot and stare into the dark. It's not the Bhagwan's silence that bothers you. It's what it leaves room for. Morning in the Oregon desert is a funny thing. It's so cold it bites. The air presses against your skin like it's still mad about the night. You shiver. Then pull back the flap of your tent and that's when you see it. Rows of identical red-robed figures marching to breakfast. Coffee cups in hand. Steam rising from steel kettles. It's like some blend of a 70s commune, a construction zone, and an outdoor yoga retreat with a dash of corporate training retreat thrown in for good measure. Rajneeshpuram is no longer an idea. It's a city now, not a metaphorical city, not a hopeful vision, a real, asphalt-paved, tax-paying, permit-bending, town hall-having city. You walk through it, and it's like watching a civilization unfold in time-lapse. In the span of months, they've erected dorms, offices, greenhouses, even their own fire department. That's right, these red-robed folks now have fire trucks. With Rajneeshi decals on the sides, they've also built a dam, a reservoir, and even a small airport. The scope is jaw-dropping. This isn't a weekend retreat anymore. It's a parallel world, built from scratch, complete with a power grid, farming co-ops, and a bustling downtown with cafes and meditation centers. You pass a yoga class in full swing beside a forklift dumping gravel. That's Rajneeshpuram for you. Here's your historical anchor. The Rajneeshis legally incorporated Rajneeshpuram as a city in Oregon in 1982, gaining municipal recognition, though many argued it was an abuse of the legal process. But at least on paper, it was legit. The locals in nearby towns weren't thrilled, particularly the old-school residents of Antelope, Oregon, a tiny place. Population under 100 nestled nearby. You swing by one day, it's the kind of town where the diner doubles as City Hall. And suddenly, it's being swarmed by strangers in robes who want to rename it City of Rajneesh. And they succeed. They move in, buy property, vote, and legally change Antelope's name to Rajneesh. The original townsfolk are livid. You can feel the tension in the air, the quiet dread in every narrowed eye and tight-lipped smile. You grab a slice of pie in the local cafe and hear whispers. This isn't just a cult, it's a takeover. And maybe that's the point, because what's happening isn't just spiritual, it's political. You start to notice how organized things are, like creepily organized. You walk past the security teams in matching red uniforms with walkie-talkies, and they don't smile. They just watch. That's when you start seeing the guns. At first, it's a rifle slung casually over someone's back near a watchtower. Then you notice a whole armed security force, fully outfitted, patrolling the perimeter. Not quite soldiers, not quite rent-a-cops, something in between. One of them even waves to you. You don't wave back. And then there's Sheila, Ma Hannon Sheila. She strides past one day during a city meeting tiny, fast-talking, unapologetic, with a perpetual smirk and a cigarette dangling from 2 fingers like she's in charge of the universe, which in a way she kind of is. She's the Bhagwan's spokesperson, interpreter, manager, and let's be honest, real-world boss. You watch her give interviews where she skewers reporters with perfect sound bites and zero patience. You can see why she's both adored and despised. There's something magnetic about her, but also razor-edged, like if charm wore brass knuckles. One afternoon, you walk past a training session, newcomers learning how to manage the town's logistics. Sheila's voice carries from a speaker somewhere. This is not a democracy. This is a Bhagwanocracy. It gets a laugh, but it's not exactly a joke. Here's your quirky tidbit at its peak. Rajneeshpuram had its own peace force, complete with custom uniforms and badges, and they even considered issuing their own currency. The people here aren't lounging in hammocks reading Rumi. They're on schedules, meetings, farm rotations, construction timetables. This is spiritual militarization, and yet at night it softens. You walk through the neon-lit streets, past meditation halls where people are weeping, embracing, singing. There's real emotion here, some of it beautiful, some of it raw. You pass a man sitting alone on a bench, tears streaming down his face, whispering something over and over. You lean closer, he's thanking the Bhagwan, just thanking him, over and over, like he's been rescued from a lifetime of drowning. You feel the pull yourself, a little, the simplicity, the certainty, a whole city where people have purpose, where everything has a plan and a meaning. But then you see the standoffish glances from the security team, the way they casually rest their hands near holsters, the way no one ever talks about leaving. Historians still argue whether Rajneeshpuram was a dangerous cult or an ambitious experiment crushed by American intolerance. Maybe it was both. But standing here in the glow of a self-made city, you start to wonder if they could build this. What else were they capable of? And what were they hiding? Late one night, you follow a gravel path out past the main square, past the barns and into the hills. There, you see something faint in the moonlight, massive Rolls Royces parked in neat rows, like a luxury car graveyard. The Bhagwan, it turns out, collects them, dozens, a fleet. The man who claims to need nothing now owns more luxury vehicles than a small dealership. The symbolism isn't lost on you, and yet no one seems to care. Back in town, the lights are still on. You hear laughter echoing off the meditation hall. You head back toward the warmth, your shoes kicking up small clouds of dust, and you try not to think about how quickly this all rose from nothing, or how easily it might come undone. You wake up to the sound of birds, fake birds. Mechanical chirps pumped through speakers hidden in the trees, part of a natural ambiance setup designed to soothe the soul. You raise an eyebrow. Of all the things to engineer here in the middle of nowhere, fake birds are an unexpected choice. But then again, this is Rajneeshpuram. Nothing is quite what it seems. The town now has a daily rhythm. Breakfast at sunrise. Work assignments by 8, meditation by 5. Everything is tightly choreographed, right down to meal rotations. You grab a plate from the communal kitchen: lentils, brown rice, steamed vegetables, simple, clean food, no meat, no sugar, just purity. That's what they call it. Purity. You've started to notice how often they use that word. And it's not just food. It's everything: speech, thought, loyalty. The red and orange robes aren't just fashion. They're identifiers. You wear them. You belong. You don't. And, well, people notice. There's something else you're starting to notice too. The smiles, they're constant. Yes, but they don't always reach the eyes. You sit through a town meeting one afternoon. It's supposed to be about planning a new greenhouse, but instead, Sheila turns it into a performance. She's fiery today, blasting outsiders for their ignorance, their fear of the truth, their refusal to let Rajneeshpuram thrive. The crowd cheers, fists pump, and you're sitting there, suddenly aware that this isn't a town, it's an echo chamber with plumbing. Sheila's charisma is undeniable. Sharp voice, sharp eyes, sharper tongue. You watch her weave political rage with spiritual justification like a woman conducting an orchestra of indignation. She doesn't just lead, she commands. And you can't ignore the tension, because beneath the laughter and chants and sun-warmed hugs, there's fear. Not obvious, not stated, but felt. In the way people glance over their shoulders. In the whispered apologies for incorrect thoughts. In the way questions get answered with veiled threats. Mainstream history gives Sheila one title: the woman behind the largest bioterror attack in U.S. history. But before that, she was just a girl from India who fell under the Bhagwan's spell and climbed the ranks with speed and steel. You remember watching her on TV later, sitting before microphones, smirking, swearing, blowing kisses to cameras like a rock star on trial. But here, in her element, she's not putting on a show. She's laying down law. And the law is whatever she says it is. Rajneesh, the silent guru, remains silent. He sits in his home now, a lavish mansion hidden behind locked gates and guards. You haven't seen him in days. Rumors swirl. Some say he sleeps 16 hours a day. Some say he's surrounded by beautiful women, selected to serve him in shifts. Others say he's in a constant meditative state, communicating only with Sheila. Historians still argue whether the Bhagwan was truly silent by choice or whether Sheila forced his silence to consolidate her own power. You wander down to the community medical center, where followers are learning to deliver babies, set broken bones, perform minor surgeries. It's like a mashup of Woodstock and Grey's Anatomy, and it's all part of the plan: total self-sufficiency. You won't need the state if you are the state. You learn that they've filed over 400 lawsuits against government agencies, neighbors, ex-members. It's lawfare as strategy. Drown the opposition in paperwork, flood the courtrooms. If they won't accept you, bury them in legal briefs until they have no breath left to resist. Here's your fringe tidbit for the day. One of the commune's stranger goals was to create a Rajneeshi political party, complete with candidates for local office. The idea: get just enough elected power to change laws in their favor or to protect their guru from deportation. And it almost worked. You find yourself wondering about the people who left, the ones who slipped away in the night, robes in hand, eyes hollow. You try to ask about them. "Where's Anna?" you say to a follower who used to chat with her daily. Her face stiffens. "She lost the path," she says flatly. Just that. No more. You visit the greenhouse's rows of vibrant vegetables stretching out in orderly plots. A young woman shows you a tomato plant she's been raising. She touches the leaves like they're sacred. Bhagwan teaches us to love even the smallest life. She says, and maybe that's true, but then why do the guards carry M16s? That night, a storm rolls over the desert, lightning flashing in jagged slashes over the hills. You sit inside the community center, listening to the wind rattle the windows, while Sheila gives a fiery speech on the dangers of the outside world. "They want to destroy us," she spits. They fear what they cannot understand. Everyone claps, cheers, even cries, and you just sit there, heart pounding, unsure if it's awe or dread, maybe both. You're starting to realize this isn't a city with a belief system. It's a belief system with a city. You close your eyes, just for a moment, letting the rhythm of chanting lull you. But someone bumps into your chair, whispers, "Don't go alone near the East Barn." You turn, but they're already gone. The East Barn looks ordinary enough, a long, low structure out past the farming co-op, flanked by a dusty road and two tall lights that flicker all night like tired eyes. But you feel it in your chest, this isn't just another storage space for hay or tools. You wait until just before dawn, that blue-gray hour when even shadows are sleepy. You walk past the vegetable plots, past the fence line, and finally to the barn, heart quietly tapping out a rhythm in your ribs. The door creaks open like something from a movie. Inside, nothing moves. Rows of crates. A strange chemical smell, sterile and sharp. It stings your nose. You see barrels labeled in blocky black stencils. Lab equipment, microscopes, petri dishes. This is no barn. This is a laboratory. You spot stacks of folders, labeled with local restaurant names, grocery stores, even shelters. Notes on public food sources. There's a line scribbled across one page, maximize diarrhea. Incapacitate, not kill. You back away, breath shallow now, because you've just stumbled into the bioterror plot that will, in time, become infamous. You're not supposed to be here. The Rajneeshis had a plan, a quiet one that started with a salad bar. Mainstream history confirms it in 1984. Rajneeshi operatives contaminated multiple salad bars in the Delays, Oregon. With salmonella, they sickened 751 people, all in an effort to swing a local election. The idea, make the townspeople too sick to vote, then overwhelm the polls with their own candidates. It sounds ridiculous, like the plot of a low-budget spy thriller. But it happened, and it worked, at least partially. The attack was only discovered after the fact, after the symptoms spread, after health investigators dug deeper. And that barn, it was the origin. You step backward out of the shadows just as a guard rounds the corner. You duck behind a stack of fertilizer, heart hammering. They shine a flashlight down the path, then disappear. You stay there for 10 more minutes, barely breathing. It's not just paranoia anymore. It's real. Later, walking back into town. The morning sun seems more artificial than usual. Everything is still clean and bright and orderly. But now you notice the unnatural edges, the forced cheerfulness. The surveillance cameras mounted under prayer flags. You start to see the town as a mask, something beautiful, worn over something deeply wrong. You can't stop thinking about Sheila, about how this plan, this virus, this crime came from the same woman who sings devotional songs at twilight and kisses old women on the forehead. Historians still argue how much the Bhagwan actually knew. Some believe Sheila masterminded it alone, a rogue move to protect her growing empire. Others insist that nothing happened without his approval, that his silence was a shield, not ignorance. And where is he, anyway? You hear that he's been speaking again, softly, privately, but enough. Rumors whisper through the compound that he's unhappy with Sheila, that she's gone too far, that he's been betrayed. And so begins the unraveling. It starts small, whispers in the meditation hall. A few senior disciples suddenly gone. People waking up in the middle of the night to find their neighbors' bunks empty. One man says Sheila is building an inner circle, a team loyal only to her. Another says she's been stockpiling pharmaceuticals and listening devices. One day, you hear raised voices from the council building. Sheila storms out, flanked by guards, face flushed. For the first time, her smile is gone. That's when the feds get involved. You see their suits around the edges of town, politely taking notes, asking questions with that slow, deliberate FBI rhythm. You hear helicopters, sometimes at night, circling like vultures. The town's joyful facade stays intact, but the fear underneath is rising, spreading like the very thing they once weaponized. You walk past a group of children in matching robes, learning Bhagwan quotes by heart. Truth is not something outside to be discovered. It is something inside to be realized. They chant in unison. But truth is being discovered, just not the kind they mean. Here's your fringe detail. The Rajneeshis weren't just making biological agents. Some accounts suggest they experimented with wiretaps and poison-laced gifts, possibly even explosives, though no firm proof ever surfaced. The depth of the paranoia ran dark and wide. That night, at the communal dining hall, people eat in silence. Sheila doesn't appear, and no one says why. A few days later, it happens Sheila disappears. Just gone. vanished in the night, along with her top aides. No warning, no farewell. Just empty beds and locked offices. The whole commune tilts on its axis. Suddenly, the Bhagwan speaks, publicly, daily, on camera. With calm intensity, he declares that Sheila betrayed him, that she created a Hitlerian regime under his nose, that she bugged his room, poisoned his doctor, and most shockingly that he had no idea. Now he's talking non-stop, holding press conferences like a spiritual CEO, tossing Sheila under every bus he can find. You watch one from the back of the crowd, his voice is gravelly but deliberate, and his eyes sparkle with something you can't name: rage, relief, showmanship. Historians still debate this part. Did he truly break free of her control? Or was this just a new tactic, a man saving his image by sacrificing his once most trusted lieutenant? As for Sheila, she resurfaces in Europe, arrested in Germany, and eventually extradited. She'll serve prison time for the poisoning, the wiretapping, the fraud. But by then, the empire she helped build is already crumbling. You walk the main boulevard again, and now it feels hollow. Stores shuttered, flowers wilting in window boxes. The Rolls Royces, once symbols of grandeur, now sit dusty and untouched. The fake birds have gone silent, and so have the people. The desert has a way of swallowing things. One day, you're in a thriving city built from scratch, shoulder to shoulder with thousands of devotees, chanting under saffron banners that snap in the wind. And the next, you're standing alone on an empty street, watching dust skitter across the pavement where laughter once echoed. You've stayed longer than most, long enough to feel the change not just in the landscape, but in the air. It used to buzz here, you remember, a kind of electric certainty pulsing through every moment. But now the charge is gone, disconnected. When Sheila vanished, so did the illusion of control. Without her, the chain of command fell apart in days. Old guards fled, new leaders fumbled. Whole departments stopped working. What was once a flawlessly humming commune became a creaky machine, sputtering, coughing, dying. It didn't help that the outside world was now watching everything. Federal agents arrived in force, not just in suits, but with badges and warrants and full authority to pull the place apart. They started with the barn, yes, that barn, and then they moved outward. Greenhouses, medical labs, housing complexes, files confiscated, computers seized, lab samples boxed and labeled under hazmat protocol. You try to stay invisible, just another pair of eyes in the crowd, but it's impossible not to feel exposed. Everyone does. You sense the shift in posture, in whispers. The smiles are gone now. The chants have thinned. Some try to meditate through it, but the tension is louder than any mantra. And then there's the Bhagwan, Osho, whatever name you still use for him in your head. He hasn't stopped talking since Sheila left. Long winding monologues, accusations, defenses. He gives interviews to anyone who'll listen, calling Sheila a criminal, a fascist, a fraud. At first it feels like honesty, a cleansing. But then you realize he's not taking any responsibility. Not one breath of self-examination. Just a finger, always pointing outward. Mainstream reports start to frame him not as a victim, but a collaborator. Even if he didn't know every detail, he surely benefited from them. The Rolls Royces, the protection, the empire. Historians still argue how complicit he really was, but by now, the court of public opinion is forming its own verdict. The state of Oregon moves to dissolve Rajneeshpuram entirely. They cite zoning violations, tax fraud, immigration abuse. More than that, they say, the whole experiment was built on deception. Not a town, but a cult compound with a post office. And here's a quirky, lesser-known detail as things were falling apart. Some followers tried to rebrand. They suggested renaming the town, ditching the red clothes, modernizing the image. One proposal, Zorba, the Buddha city, a nod to Osho's ideal of combining spiritual depth with earthy pleasure. didn't stick, the people begin to scatter. Some slip away at dawn, walking quietly down the long gravel road to the highway. Others pile into buses and leave in clusters. Robes exchanged for jeans. Mallets tucked away. There are no goodbyes, just absence, and you check as slowly. You look around one last time the meditation hall, now echoing with ghosts. The greenhouses, where the plants still grow like no one told them the dream had died. The prayer flags, frayed and limp, fluttering in silence. There's a moment that catches in your throat a little girl running barefoot across the square, laughing. Her parents trail behind, still in robes, still hopeful. Maybe they haven't heard yet, or maybe they just refuse to believe it's over. Emotional memory stirs in you nostalgia, disbelief, maybe even a soft heartbreak. For all its strangeness, this place was home, even if only briefly, even if built on illusion. You climb into your borrowed van and turn the engine over. The tires crunch on the gravel like dry bones. The radio crackles with static until, finally, it lands on a news broadcast. You listen as a flat voice reports that the Bhagwan has been arrested on immigration fraud charges. His jet was intercepted while trying to flee the country. He's now in custody. You glance in the rearview mirror. Rajneeshpuram is shrinking in the distance. And then, just like that, gone. Here's your fringe tidbit for the road when federal agents arrested the Bhagwan. They found over $58,000 in cash, diamond-studded watches, and a stash of prescription drugs on board. Not quite the image of the detached mystic he'd always claimed to be. He eventually pleaded guilty to the immigration charges and was deported. But before he left, he gave a farewell press conference, said he forgave everyone, said he loved America, even as it kicked him out. Then he smiled, boarded the plane, and disappeared into legend. Rajneeshpuram was officially disbanded in 1985. What's left now, buildings, reclaimed by wind and weed. Rusted tools, faded signs. Some say the land is haunted not by ghosts, but by the intense energies that once gathered here. Others visit as a kind of pilgrimage, a cautionary tale carved into the Oregon soil. You pull over for a moment. The sun is setting. The sky burns gold and orange and lavender colors the Rajneeshis once wore like sacred armor. You wonder, was it always destined to fall? Or was it just too much, too fast? A wild dream, briefly real, now gone. Years pass, but the aftertaste lingers. You're back in Oregon, long after the world moved on. The air feels cooler now, less urgent, and yet, something in your gut tightens as you drive down Highway 97, knowing you're near the bones of a city that once promised utopia and delivered something stranger. There's no sign anymore that says "Welcome to Rajneeshpuram." In its place, a simple wooden post marks the entrance to what's now a Christian youth camp, a place scrubbed clean of its past, or trying to be. You stop at the edge of the property. You don't trespass, you just observe. The landscape hasn't changed much. The high desert still stretches out, all golden scrub and wind-bent sage. But the feeling different, quieter, like a stage after the show's long over. Set pieces abandoned, the audience gone. You wonder if the kids here know what happened beneath their basketball courts and dormitories. If they ever find glimmers of red silk buried under the dirt. If they know that this place once buzzed with people who believed, fiercely, in something that looked like peace and smelled like control. Back then, everyone had a role. Now, the roles are forgotten. You read somewhere that a few die-hard Rajneeshis stayed in Oregon for years after the collapse. They lived in nearby towns, changed their names, tried to rebuild. Some rejoined society, others never quite did. One woman opened a bookstore. Another became a therapist. A few moved to India and never came back. But the stories remain like oil stains that won't wash out. Mainstream historical fact, the Rajneeshpuram episode is still studied in law schools and FBI training centers. Not just for the bioterror plot, but for how a group built a functioning city and nearly toppled democratic processes using charisma, legal loopholes, and tax code gymnastics. In some classrooms, it's called a soft coup. In others, a failed experiment in utopia. No one can quite agree. Historians still argue whether Rajneeshpuram was a cult, a commune, or a religious revolution that crumbled under its own contradictions. Some insist it was simply misunderstood. Others are sure it was a blueprint for authoritarianism with a spiritual smile. You start walking along the fence line, eyes scanning the horizon. You remember the feeling of those early mornings, the sound of bells calling people to meditation, the smell of incense mixing with dust, and then you spot something strange, a tiny scrap of orange cloth snagged on barbed wire. Faded now, sun-bleached, but unmistakable, a fragment. It hits you harder than you expect. There's a bittersweet ache to it, like finding a love letter in an attic box. Part of you wants to take it, preserve it. The other part says, let it rot. Let the desert eat what it needs. Here's a fringe footnote. Some Rajneeshis believe the end of the commune wasn't failure, but evolution, that the energy they built didn't die, it just scattered, like seeds on the wind. Some claim that energy still draws seekers to Oregon, to meditation retreats or desert fasts, that Osho's words still echo in the rocks. You reach your car and sit on the hood, watching the light fade, and you remember Sheila didn't stay quiet after her prison sentence. She moved to Switzerland, started a new life running care homes for the elderly. She gave interviews, appeared in documentaries, even posed for fashion spreads. She still defends her actions, still smiles when she speaks of Osho. Would you do it all again? A reporter once asked her. Sheila tilted her head and said, I did what I believed in. I loved my master. That line sticks in your head. I loved my master. Was that all it was? Devotion gone too far? Or something darker? You read his later writings, if you can find them. After his return to India, the Bhagwan renamed himself again Osho and kept teaching until his death in 1990. His followers say he died peacefully. Others whisper about poisoning, betrayal, heart failure. No one knows for sure. He left behind millions of words, hundreds of books, and followers all over the world. The Osho International Meditation Resort in Pune still operates today. Polished, corporate, almost spa-like. The movement survived, albeit rebranded. Softer edges, more yoga, fewer guards, but the seat is the same. And that's the strangest part. He won. In a way, not in Oregon, but elsewhere. You close your eyes and remember your last night in the commune. The stars were absurdly bright. A man played sitar near the fire circle, and someone passed around a bowl of warm lentils. For a moment, everything felt perfect, safe, like maybe the world really could be rebuilt with love and laughter and clever urban planning. You remember thinking maybe this is what heaven feels like, but it wasn't. Not even close. It was just a story that fell apart when too many people believed it without question. The sun dips below the hills now. The youth camp behind you turns on its floodlights. Somewhere, a kid yells, a whistle blows. Life, in its new form, continues. And you wonder, what does it mean to lose faith in something? Is it the death of an idea, or just the end of a chapter? The wind kicks up, the orange scrap dances for a moment, then flutters free. You don't follow it. You think about how quiet it got after everything collapsed, not just around the commune, but inside you. The stillness that used to come with meditation was different than this silence. That had been warm, almost golden, like a soft wool blanket around your thoughts. This was empty, hollow, like walking through the house of a friend who moved out overnight. And still, something in you won't let it go completely. You start looking up old names, people you knew only as Ananda this or Swami that. You wonder what happened to them. Did they go back to their birth names? Did they ever talk about Rajneeshpuram again? You find a few in forums, others on Facebook, of all places. Their profiles are quiet, private. One sells handmade jewelry. One is now a nurse in Denmark. Another runs a spiritual blog but never mentions Oregon, as if that part of life was a bruise never worth pressing again. You reach out to one, a man who once ran the bakery and always had flour on his nose. He replies 2 weeks later, "That time was beautiful and terrifying. Sometimes I wish I could forget it, but I can't." That sentence haunts you. Mainstream historical fact, the Rajneeshi bioterror attack was the largest of its kind on U.S. soil. Over 750 people sickened. No one died, but many were hospitalized. It's now cited in terrorism studies. A precursor to later fears about biological warfare, FBI files from the time are still partially redacted. You find that both comforting and absurd. All that madness and still, some of the most dangerous material remains classified. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. The commune ran its own pirate radio station during its heyday. It broadcast speeches, music, even morning weather in the voice of a cheerful woman named Sita. "Sunny and 72 in paradise today," she'd chirp. The station was called Kro. Zorba Radio. People loved it. Even outsiders tuned in. The signal carried further than they meant it to. Now static, you take a trip to Antelope. The town Rajneeshpuram tried to swallow. Fewer than 50 people live there now. Some houses are abandoned. A cafe sits on the corner. Open, but mostly empty. You order coffee. The man behind the counter eyes you like he's seen your type before. He asks if you're one of them. You say no, but he knows you're not telling the full truth. He pours the coffee and tells you a story about how, back in '83, they found microphones planted in the city council chambers, about the stray cats that started disappearing, about how one woman, a school teacher, carried a pistol in her purse every day for 6 months. You nod. You don't argue. You just listen. Then he tells you something stranger. They still come back. You know, every year or two, like ghosts, standing on the hill, looking out. Don't say much, just looking. You finish your coffee. Leave a tip, step outside. There's something about the wind here that hasn't changed. You close your eyes and hear it again. The clatter of bike chains. The murmur of robes in motion. The crackle of desert firelight. 1,000 people breathing in rhythm. That was real. That happened. But so did the salmonella, the poison, the threats. Historians still argue whether the idealism was ever genuine or whether it was always a mask for hunger. Not hunger for food or love, but for power, pure and humming. The kind that makes people smile while slowly turning into something else. Maybe that's what makes it so unforgettable. You think back to the Bhagwan, how his laugh sounded both joyful and cruel, how his eyes never blinked enough, how every time he said, "be in the moment," he was simultaneously preparing his next flight from it. There's a moment you remember a fire ritual. Somewhere in your second year, everyone standing barefoot in the cold, arms lifted, music swelling, 100 voices repeating his name. Someone next to you cried, not from joy, from something deeper, something breaking. You asked them why later, and they just said, "It's too much." Too much everything. Now you get it. As you drive away from Antelope, you realize there's something strangely beautiful about what's left. Not in a nostalgic way, more like how a forest fire leaves behind seeds that only germinate in heat. You wonder what yours were. What did you carry forward? You don't wear red anymore. You don't chant. You still meditate sometimes, but it's not the same. No group, no guru, just you, alone on a quiet floor. And yet, sometimes, in that silence, you feel the old heartbeat. Faint, but there, like a drum, buried deep. Maybe that's why you came back here. Not to find answers, but to understand the shape of the question. You stop at the side of the road again. Right before the descent back into the valley, there's a final view of the old land. The high plains, the ghost grid of what used to be streets. From this height, it looks almost like a fossil, a prehistoric skeleton of a dream. A final sensory detail, the sun warms your hands through the windshield. The radio plays a song you haven't heard in years, one you used to dance to barefoot. Surrounded by hundreds, you hum along, eyes closed, until it ends, and just as the last note fades, a thought passes through you like wind. Maybe it didn't vanish, maybe it just changed names. The twilight in Oregon feels different now. It's softer, like the end of a long day where the light stretches out slowly before slipping away. You find yourself back where it all began, the edges of the former Rajneeshpuram land. No signs, no banners, just dust, grass, and the vast sky. You take a deep breath and remember that first strange morning, when everything seemed possible, when you thought a new kind of society might sprout in the desert, one built on radical love, open arms, and an endless supply of meditations. That feeling of awe, mixed with a pinch of suspicion, now settles in your chest. You try to hold on to it, but it feels slippery like catching smoke with bare hands. Over the years, you've sifted through stories and rumors, testimonies and court files. You've traced the rise and fall, the promises and betrayals, and through it all, you felt a strange connection, a pulse of something human beneath the spectacle, something that went beyond robes and scandals. In the silence here, the wind plays an old tune, faint laughter, broken prayers, and distant chants. You almost expect to see those saffron flags fluttering again, tattered but stubborn. There's a mainstream fact you keep returning to. Rajneeshpuram was not just a failed commune or a bizarre footnote. It was an experiment with the fragile balance between freedom and control, faith and fanaticism. It asked questions we're still grappling with today. How much power should one leader hold? How far can belief carry a community before it fractures? What happens when idealism meets human nature's darker edges? The scholars keep debating these points. Some say it was an inevitable crash. Others see it as a warning about the cult of personality. Historians still argue whether the commune's vision was naive or cunning, revolutionary or delusional. Maybe it was all of these things. Now, something more intimate, you recall the nights when the desert stars were so bright they seemed to press against the thin walls of your room. You remember the smell of cedar incense mixed with sweat and hope, the hum of quiet conversations that stretched into dawn, the clink of teacups, and the softness of a stranger's hand on your shoulder during a moment of doubt. You remember the loneliness, to that hollow ache of belonging somewhere no one outside could understand. That feeling of being part of something huge, yet painfully isolated. A softer, quieter detail, the early mornings when dew gathered on the sagebrush. Tiny droplets sparkling like diamonds in the weak light. You'd breathe in the cold air and feel, just for a moment, that the world was new again. Now, the land is silent but watching. Time has folded over itself here, layering memories and myths. Some locals avoid the area. Others come seeking closure, curiosity, or a touch of that old magic. You pull out a worn photograph, a group shot of Rajneeshis in their best smiles, arms around one another, faces radiant with belief. You finger the edges, tracing the ghosts. You think about the Bhagwan Osho, the enigmatic figure at the center. How he once promised liberation through laughter and meditation, but ended up mired in controversy. His charm was magnetic, his teachings revolutionary. Yet his story also carries a cautionary note that charisma without accountability can become tyranny. You wonder about Sheila, too, the woman who wielded power like a blade, ruthless and brilliant. How her ambition helped build the city and then tear it down. Her story reminds you that every utopia needs its builders and its destroyers. A fringe detail floats to mind after the commune's collapse. Some followers created underground newsletters and secret meetings, calling themselves the Rajneesh Resurrection. They believed the spirit of the movement was not dead, but dormant, waiting for the right moment to rise again. Their gatherings were small, held in basements and remote cabins, fading quietly over time but never entirely disappearing. You smile at the thought. Maybe that's the nature of stories like this, they never fully vanish. They linger in the shadows, whispered in quiet corners, waiting for curious souls like you to find them. As you fold the photograph and tuck it away, you feel a gentle closure. Not an end exactly, but a resting point. You look up at the sky, the first stars blinking awake, and you say to yourself, dreams can burn bright and sometimes they burn out, but the embers always remain. You carry them inside you. The night deepens, the desert breathes, and so do you. Sweet dreams.